All right, fantastic. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. I am Marty with JMT Consulting, and today we have a fantastic topic for you. It's called Beyond Spreadsheets, Leveraging Cloud Solutions for Modern Budgeting and Forecasting. Before we get to our panelists, I do have a couple of housekeeping notes to be aware of. And the first is regarding questions. Declan, if you want to switch the slide to housekeeping, we'll take a look at how to submit your questions during the webinar. There is a little questions bot at the bottom of the screen. We'll handle questions towards the end, so please be patient with us. We will reserve time towards the end to take a look at any questions that you have. Today's recording and slides will be emailed to you following this webinar, so you'll have those for your review. On the next slide, regarding CPE credits, you've probably been to a CPE webinar before. What we ask you to do is answer the polling questions as they come up. And at the end of the webinar, you'll actually have a survey. So make sure to take that survey and submit it. You do have to stay for the duration of the webinar, which will be about 50 to 55 minutes. And if you have any technical issues whatsoever, Kristen is at the other side of that email address there on your screen. You can contact her. She'll be your point of contact for the CPE credits. All right, let's take a look at who we have on our panel today. I'd like to introduce you to Bulin Tran and Declan Lawler. Bulin, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Marty. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Bulin Tran. I am a Senior VP of Financial Solutions at JMT Consulting. I've spent 25 plus years working with nonprofits, helping them streamline their back office accounting operations, leveraging financial solutions. In today's webinar, we will be talking about one of those solutions, which is Sage Intacct Budget Management. And joining me today is Declan. Declan, would you like to take just a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Declan. I'm on the FP&A team here at JMT. I've seen firsthand many times how adopting a tool like SIP, Sage Intacct Planning, can really make people's lives easier, and sometimes that process of budgeting can even become fun. So really excited to show it to you today.
Great. So since today's presentation is CPE accredited, I wanted to make sure we go through the learning objective of today's session. So the learning objectives are review the challenges with Microsoft Excel-based budgeting and forecasting, dive into implementation strategies and best practice to consider for budgeting and forecasting, and then finally, review key features in Sage Intacct Budget Solutions that supports best practice. Next slide. So our agenda for today, we have a full agenda. So we'll do a quick intro to who is JMT Consulting. And then we'll talk a little bit about, why stakeholders really get frustrated with the budget process. I have here, I hate the budget process. I don't know if it's that extreme, but certainly there's many stakeholders do have challenges with that. And then what are the major budget process? So we're going to talk about, what are the different processes involved in budgeting. And then we'll talk about, the best practice or budget process, and then the benefits of budgeting solutions. Why do organizations invest in a budget management solution, right? And then we will introduce the Sage Intacct budgeting and planning solutions, and then Declan will do a presentation of that solution, and then we'll wrap it up with Q&A. So really quick in terms of who we are, JMT Consulting is we're a consulting firm. Our mission is to help nonprofit organizations streamline their back office accounting operations by leveraging financial solutions. We were founded in 1991, and today we've service over 2,000 nonprofit. We work exclusively with nonprofit. As you can see here, we are headquartered in Nashville, and we have clients throughout the US and few in Canada as well. And then all these dots here that you see, they represent, sort of some of where our clients are located. So slide, please. So really quick I want to just quickly go and talk about our services. So we implement and support cloud-based ERP solutions, two of which are Sage Intacct and MIP. MIP also has a on-premise solution as well. We implement and support budget management solution, one of which we're going to be talking about today. But we also implement support Martis, as is another solution. There's an icon here to the right, you can see, as well as an FP&A solution called Vena. We provide outsourced accounting services, and the solution that we leverage when we provide the outsourced accounting is Sage Intacct. We perform accounting operation assessment work because a lot of our organization, our clients may need a health check, to look at how they are performing or how their systems is either supporting them or not supporting their operations. We also assist with system integrations. So a lot of these the ERP, you can think of ERP as sort of the heart of the accounting systems, but many of them have tentacles, I would say tentacles, into other solutions as well. So we help with that integration. And then finally, support the grant management, systems as well. Next slide. Great. Innovate. So Innovate is our in-person user conference. This is a great event to meet, your peers, which is primarily nonprofits, and learn more about the technology that we support, specifically Sage Intacct and MIP. There are multiple training sessions in this event, including sessions focuses on industry trends. Our next year's Innovate will be held in Nashville. So if you're interested in going to Nashville, connect with us to sign up for this event. Next. All right. So what I'd like to do is start with a polling question. And this kind of give us a little feedback into so what folks are using today for budgeting. So is it Microsoft Excel? Is it a third-party budget solution like a Martis is a third-party budget solution, or Vena? There's tons of them out there. Is it a budget solution that's part of your ERP? Is it none of the above, or you might not be sure what you're currently using today? So we do want to see the results that what our audience has selected. So we're going to maybe wait a minute or so, although I did see a pop-up earlier. There you go. That is not surprising. Is it surprising to you, Declan?
Not at all. Yeah, Microsoft Excel is what we see a lot of people using, but fortunately, some of these tools that we're going to show integrate very well with Microsoft Excel. All of those skills that you've developed learning how to do things in Excel are not going to be lost at all. In fact, they're going to make your lives a lot easier.
Right. So let's move on to the next slide. So why budgeting planning? What are some of the challenges? Okay, so it takes too long. So I think Excel is great, but the process of consolidating, the process of, checking the errors, right? And then, and there's usually repetitions to this as well, because there are changes to these files, right? And you're having to collaborate and bring it all together again when there are changes. So the process does take a long time when you're using it, using a solution like Excel, which is what most people use, right? And another comment that we hear, and by the way, the items here are not, obviously, these are some of the items that we pull together based on what we've heard, but of course, there are a lot of other reasons why, a manual budgeting process in Excel could be frustrating, right? It doesn't help me run my operations, or it's outdated before it's even finished, based on how long it takes to compile a budget together, right? There might be too many iterations. There might be too many people involved in the process. You have to determine who should be involved, because the more people you have, it just takes longer to to do that budget, go through that budget process. There might be a lack understanding of importance, right? In terms of what areas to focus on when you're compiling the budget. And by the time it's done, I don't even recognize the number. So it's based on, the number of, number of iterations you're going through, right? So start with one point, and by the time you're done, it might look different to you. And then lots of effort to compile the data. It certainly is a lot of effort, and it's also risky. I sometimes hear people have mentioned there's gross mistakes in the budget. It's because the risk of compiling these Excel files together, it's so easy to make mistakes. I don't know, Declan, are there any other points that you may want to mention?
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head at the end there with talking about mistakes. We can create really beautiful reports and really great Excel files with great formulas, and then all it takes to break them is somebody hitting the wrong button when they go to copy and paste it all in, and now all your formulas are wiped out. It's really hard to actually enable collaboration when we're dealing with Microsoft Excel, because unless you're behind someone on the computer kind of shadowing them as they're doing something, you're not really working together. So Sage Intacct Planning, this dedicated tool that we'll show, it enables that collaboration a lot more. It's a lot harder to break things. We've put a lot of work into making sure that our formulas and our forecasts are providing accurate information.
Yep. Let's go to our next slide. All right, since we just talked about the pain point, here's the next polling question. I would love to hear from the audience, what are your pain points, right? This thing popped up again. So what are your pain points? Does the process take too long? Is it manual? Is it high risk for you? Is that one of your concerns? Are there other concerns? Is it all of the above, or maybe you're not sure? Okay, so we're gonna give folks a few minutes to respond to this, and then we're gonna see what people are saying about their budget process. I'm thinking it's gonna take too long. It might be one of the higher percentage. Oh, I was wrong. Very manual. Yes, actually, that was that or the very manual. So, I think this resonates with what we just talked about, that it is a very manual process. So, all right, let's go. Next slide, please. So I want to just talk a little bit about the budget process. When we talk about the budget, what are we talking about? And the reason why I had put this together a few years ago, the reason why it's circular is because the budget is, if you want it to be really effective in budgeting, it's not just about budgeting, but you should also incorporate forecasting. And because you wanted to take the budget and and monitor it, but also to forecast it out during the year, right? And then it goes right back to the beginning again. So you start with defining your goals, right? You have revenue goals, you have programmatic goals. If you have, what are some of the organizational goals that you want to consider before you start this process, right? And then determine the timeline, right? You want to, if are your calendar year or your fiscal year, you want to make sure you start an appropriate time to, to get it completed and get it over to the board and have it approved, right? So really think about the timeline, and factor in resources as well, right? Preparing the template. So it depends on how often you do the budgeting and the forecasting, but you may need to update these templates, right? And so the dynamics of the organization changes, right? And so there might be programs that you didn't have a year ago that you're now, that have started up. So there might be changes to the template as well. Training. It is so important to train. One of my clients, he's a director of reporting and budgeting. He does training, and he uses a budget management solutions. And it's the same solution every year, but every year he does training. And he rolls it out so smoothly because he does that training every year. And so because for within the accounting, you kind of are familiar with, the accounting side of it. For everybody else outside of the accounting department, they may not be involved. They may only be involved once a year if you don't do forecasting, right? And so it's really important that we train the people on how to do this, even if you do it every year. And then once you have that training, actually creating the budget, getting that approved, right? And then execution and monitoring it, budget versus actual reporting, right? But then bring it back and do that reforecasting, right? And seeing how well did we budget, sort of where we are, and then this process starts all over again. So, for smaller size organization, I can see there's a lot of challenge because resource capacity to do forecasting. Ideally, I mean, even if you do mid-year forecasting, is better than doing no forecasting at all. So.
And yeah, I'll just jump in here quickly, Bulin. Sometimes working with clients, it feels like their entire budgeting process is just step 3. We're gathering data from our department heads and we're plugging it into an Excel file. So getting a dedicated tool where it makes that process easy, where you don't have to create a template for each new feature that you want to enable in your budgeting process is a lifesaver. And it allows you to kind of get over that hump of step 3, move through steps 5 and 6 really easily. And then you can focus more of your time on that forecasting and that executing, like Bulin was just talking about, which is essential.
Right. So the key factor, best practice budgeting process, a couple of things I wanted to highlight. Because we're kind of short on time, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but I think control the number of budget iterations developed, so trying to get something perfect, it's gonna take, it might take a long time to get it perfect, right? So but I think, try to limit that iteration to reduce that time, right? So that's a comment there. Standardized budget methods with the rest of the company and with what senior management expects to see. So you have to understand what your board, what senior management wants to see from a budget standpoint, and how you should be budget, the method that you should be using for budgeting. Based budgets on business drivers. So it depends on, you have to understand what your business drivers. If you're a 501c6, you would be your memberships, would be your business drivers, right? It could be 501c3, it may be grants, so, different types of contributions, and then not just the revenue side, but also on the expense side as well. Certainly want to identify key people in the budgeting. So, like I mentioned before, the more people you have, it's just going to take, the longer time if you're doing it manually. And so it's very important to identify those key peoples. And then lastly here, the last item here, link the annual planning process to rolling forecast and management reporting. So if you have a beautiful budget, you gotta leverage it. And where you're leveraging it is to see how you chart out your actuals against your budget, that course. You have to chart out that course. And then you reforecast to see if there's adjustment that's needed, right? Based on your initial set of assumptions. And as Declan said, there are reasons why we have these solutions, and the reason is to automate all of this, right? Declan, I'm going to have you talk about the next two items because I think you know exactly what these solutions do.
Yeah, Bulin is definitely right. I spend a lot of time in SIP, and it's really a great tool. Budgeting faster, these budget worksheets that are in SIP, we definitely have some clients who end up liking the look of feel in SIP more than Excel. But for those who don't, it makes that process super easy of getting your Excel file and clicking an import button to bring all of that data right into Sage Intacct Planning. Once that data is in there, there's various sheets, various features to make your reporting life so much easier. You click a button and you're exporting a PDF or an Excel file, and you can save multiple kinds of reports. We can create dashboards, whatever you want to see really out of a report, you can generate that in SIP. And then lastly, that collaborating better. So, encouraging people to get kind of into that same cloud-based solution where we're working on something together. There's a really subtle difference between working on a Word document versus a Google document, for example. When you can see someone's little bubble up there, you know that they're collaborating, you know that you're working together, and you can just accomplish a lot more. Additionally, Excel files, we're going to be sending things back and forth. It's difficult to get that one source of truth. And often you're not going to be able to collaborate until you have that source of truth. So having a cloud-based solution like Sage Intacct Planning, where you can treat that as your source of truth, where we can export data from Sage Intacct Planning or import our updated data into Sage Intacct Planning, refer to the same budget lines in the same system where we can see our colleagues collaborating in that corner. It's a helpful solution that just brings in all of those things. We're going to be working faster, we're going to create better reports, and we're going to be aware of the contributions that everyone on the team is making. You want me to take this one as well, Bulin? Keep going? Yeah, sure. So definitely, we have, I've mentioned the faster workflows, the cloud-based solution, this no assembly required. We can import your dimensions from Sage Intacct. Not only can we accept Excel files, but we can connect to other sources of data and really drag and drop data dimensions to create a budget that looks like what you want, very quickly, but additionally enable you to create your budget in a variety of different ways. Typically we see organizations budgeting at a location and then maybe a cost center, maybe personnel under that. And then we can flip these things around. You can create an entirely new budget with an entirely new structure. And it just gives you that opportunity to see things in a different way, which will allow you to ask new questions or present things in a way that hasn't been presented before and allow others to kind of get that new perspective that you've created. That real-time data sync, click of a button, we can bring in your actuals. It's recording your data in your wider ERP system and bringing it in. So at any time, at the close of a month, beginning of the month, you can bring in the data that you want to see. And side by side, in the FP&A world, that budget to actuals report is the bee's knees. Everybody wants that budget to actuals report, and being able to bring that in with the click of a button, have it updated live every time, and export that instantly is one of those things that really keeps you getting back into Sage Intacct planning and ensuring that you're really using the tool. And then, one thing I'll definitely show later as I'm going through our demo is this customer support section. There's an awesome little help center in Sage Intacct planning, great articles provided by Sage, no really long videos, really good, short, concise 3-minute videos explaining how things are done. And team management is a part of that. There's training tools in that customer support to allow you to train your team on things that you'll learn in your process of using SIP. And then additionally, the sharing functionality within SIP is great. We can have people collaborating in the same environment. We can, if we have an existing process where we like to send Excel files out to people, we can bring that in and make that part of the process as well. There's tons of variety with how we can manage our team, create a new process, and fit an existing process into the tool in Intacct planning.
Oops, I muted myself. So our third question here is, do you currently allow your department, division leaders to enter and submit their budget? So yes, you do, or no, this process stays within the finance and accounting team, or no, but would like to allow your department leaders to, enter and submit their budget. And then, or lastly, not sure. So we'll see how our audience are collaborating with the departments in terms of, compiling or building this budget for the organization. Let's see what the folks says. All right, great. And most of the time, most of our clients do, extend the budgets to the, the department managers to get them involved in the budgeting. Okay, so let's move forward. All right, so before we kick it off, I'm just gonna prep this. The full demo can take, an hour plus, 1 to 2 hours, right? We only have 25 minutes. So Declan is going to have to really determine what features is he going to show us to just highlight, the solution.
Yeah, so can everyone see that Sage Intacct planning screen here? Good? Great, yeah. As Bulin said, there's a lot I want to show you guys, but we're kind of limited today. We're going to spend most of today in the inputs main section of SIP. So Sage Intacct planning, I call it SIP. Just trying to help you not get confused with all the acronyms we're going to be throwing out here. Over here on the left is really, the meat and potatoes of the whole program. This is where we build our budget structure. We can do things however your organization budgets. So here we just have department names. We can budget by personnel here. We've seen people actually just name these departments after who's responsible in the system for managing them. And then when we open things up, like we can pick on this learning and development department here, we can see kind of deeper data into how this is actually structured. So now we have a children, youth, and family subsidiary. Under that, we have our operational expenses. And then under that, we have all of our individual budget lines. So for example, program supplies here, It doesn't have any data in it, but we have all of these options here. And this big rectangle here over on the right in SIP is called the form view. The form view is your first option for entering data into SIP, really keying things manually, but intentionally too. So we can set this so that it occurs monthly, quarterly, yearly, or just once. We can make it a different amount each month. We can change it to the same amount each month. I can enter, $100 here, just kind of keying things in, changing the currency. So that ability to work with multiple currencies is sometimes really nice. Additionally, if we have an existing formula for a certain line, we could input a formula here. Here you'll see separate assumptions that we've created elsewhere in the system, but you can create any number of assumptions so that you can plug it into a formula. It makes things really easy to use. As you saw, I entered that $100, and now we're seeing that appear across the board in this gray line here. We also have the ability to control the date ranges on any budget line. So if we have some items that aren't working within the same scope as the wider project, we can come down to that individual expense line and change that date range for them there. And then lastly, here in the form view, we have all of our dimensions. So all of these budget lines here are now filterable, sortable, and most importantly, reportable by all of these dimensions that you can select here. And this is all stuff that we can bring in automatically by connecting to an existing data source. Up in the top right here, I'll now draw your attention to the budget settings. This controls kind of a lot of that background stuff. So these dimensions here, you might be wondering, okay, well, where is this drop-down list coming from to begin with? We build that stuff in the background in the budget settings. One of those tabs is dimensions. And in our funder dimension here, we can see that we have all of these options here for that drop-down menu. We can click the plus, and we can add more ones and then really easily just delete it or rename it. Very intuitive to use. In the general tab, we can change kind of the fiscal year of our entire budget. We can see it's a dedicated tool to a nonprofit here by selecting that nonprofit option. And then again, changing the currency or renaming the entire budget. So form view is kind of your standard first way to enter data. We create our structure, we come into our budget lines, and then we enter that relevant information on the budget lines. But for all of us who use Excel, this doesn't look like Excel. We can make it look like Excel by turning on the grid entry view over here, also in the top right. When we flip on grid entry, it's just going to close up all of that extra information about each of these lines. We don't see the dimensions anymore. Now we're just looking, hard coding at all of our data. And we can come in here similar to this line. I can just add $100, come in here, add another $100. Things just, you can see that they would flow very quickly here if we just need to key in numbers or kind of look at everything at once. If we use these two kind of collapse and expand icons up here, if I collapse everything really quickly, right now we can kind of see our budget where we have big fat zeros everywhere, which is great for the demo, not great for your budget. And then we can see that those changes that we've made are being reflected in these months here. Also, in the grid entry view, we can sort and filter all of this data to show only the relevant budget lines at each time. And if we did want to adjust the dimensions or that kind of extra data that goes into each line in the hierarchy here, we would just double click on that one line and it opens up all of that form view options for us. So this stuff, this grid entry view, we see a lot of people using, especially as they're familiarizing themselves with the tool, just because it looks a lot more like Excel and it makes a lot more sense. We can also see all of the data for multiple structure lines at once, rather than just kind of only seeing all of that information for one line in the form view. But it's really up to you with how you guys want to see it. Right, this structure here, right, these pluses and the three dotted lips here will give you all of the options for all of the budget lines as you're creating things. And when adopting a tool like SIP, the first process is creating the structure. So if I come at the top level and I click plus, it's going to give me that option down here to create all of these new groupings. So let's just say new subsidiary, type it in and hit the checkbox. Now it's going to walk us through a wizard for building out that subsidiary. We already have it down here. We can see that over on the left. So sometimes, when I'm flying through something like this, I might just hit exit and do what I want back at this level. But here, we can go through these options. Let's add a revenues and let's add an operational expenses with no grouping underneath it. Additionally, maybe we even have another further subsidiary under there, and let's add one of those. We can hit next, and that's going to give us, it's really going to ask us to populate now this revenue section. You'll see it kind of switched over to here. But for now, I'll just hit exit, and we can kind of examine the structure that we've created more, right? So now we can name this again. I'm in the form view now for this subsidiary. I can control all of the dimensions that are applied here. I can also drag and drop these other operational expenses and revenue lines into that subsidiary. So now we can really build that structure with how we want to. But again, great part of this tool, you can see it isn't a very heavy lift to build a structure like this and then import that data and create those budget lines. But we do have the option to connecting to existing systems with this new budget creation tool. And you can also see these are all other demo environments. You can be working with multiple budgets at once. Clicking these, I would just flip over to another environment, and then I would have this one that I could flip back into. You also start with a default example budget as well, and you can create multiples of those. But here with this new budget creation tool, something I would love to go into with more time in a demo, but here you can just see we can use Sage Intacct data, we can create existing planning files, and we can start everything just from an Excel file here too. And then when it comes to bringing in actuals data, we have this button over here, which is our Connect to Sage Intacct, where we can bring in those actuals data live whenever we want to. Before I show you my favorite part of SIP, I'll show you quickly the Sheets tab. The Sheets tab is really where we do all of our analysis. So here you can see we're just looking at operational expenses for a wider budget because we haven't put in any filterings, and we're looking at it by budget line. But here we can control all of these to look at things by our dimensions. So here we have a division here. Now we're looking at all the operational expenses where this division dimension is applied. Don't have any revenues in here, so I'll go back to the inputs main really quickly, where we can then find a revenue line somewhere. Let's see what's got one. Right here, I'm just opening things up, looking at operational expenses. Here we go. Historical has some revenues. And let's throw in a very generous NYC grant. Let's do the same amount each billing, and we'll do something like this. And we'll save that. And now when we go back to the Sheets tab, so the Inputs main tab is really about getting your data into the system. It's really a filing system, organizing your data in a way that makes sense for maintenance. And when you want to do analysis, you pop over to the Sheets tab, right? Sure, we all know how to use pivot tables in Excel. The Sheets tab is a pre-created, awesome pivot table that can be moved in any which way. So now you can see we have this revenue line showing up, and at any time we can save one of these views with various filters as a custom view. So we make it once, we set our filters once, and then anyone in the team can pop over, select that view with the live data, and then hit this awesome create report button. So here, this create report button will take whatever I'm viewing here, export it as an Excel file or a PDF. You even have the option to create as a budget template, which brings me gratefully into the last part. First, actually, I'll get to dashboards, sorry. Dashboards in the Sheets tab, very similar. We're doing analysis. The dashboard is like the cousin of the Sheets tab. We have our filters up here, and it's just a great way to kind of show off our data, to send this stuff over to the board, creating reports, acknowledging, creating widgets for specific departments to get people's input. There's no limit on how many dashboards you can create. You can have your general budget dashboard. You can create your own brand new dashboard for a team with adding widgets, something with KPIs. Let's add one of these. Let's add one of these. Right, we can create these tools really quickly. We can share it with anyone, and we can export it as a report, just like in the Sheets tab. But back to the inputs main for our last thing here. I want to show you the budget template option, because this is something that all of us Excel users will really like. It's something that we see all the time. I might have to change the way I'm sharing my screen here, so please let me know if you can see this Excel file. Just 1 second while it loads up. But this allows us to use our existing Excel skills so that we don't have to kind of learn a whole new tool. And then we can make our edits in Excel in a way that's compatible with SIP, upload everything in that same area, right? So we just exported the budget template. We would just import it when we're done. And let's see if you guys can see this really quickly. Can we see an Excel file, or are we still looking at SIP? So let me just flip things over really quickly. Here we go. So this is that Excel file that we pulled out, and all of these columns correspond to some of those input boxes that were in the form view. So here you can get this Excel file, share it with your team. It has a standardized way of entering that data. We have a whole column to add comments to the end. We can adjust dates. And when it comes to doing things month by month, we can zero this out every single month, kind of start from scratch from a new file. And then whenever we're ready, we go back into SIP and we just import all of this information. So it makes things a lot easier. I'll flip back just to SIP really quickly, just to show you guys where that gets imported, right? You have that import option here. It will walk you through a series of steps. We're just going to choose that Excel file that I just downloaded here, open that up. And again, this is one of those things where it's making that process that you're doing with your team, solidified here. These are the steps that you're walking through. So training people on these existing processes is a lot easier, and it lasts a lot longer in a team because the processes aren't getting changed every month or so. We would come through here, we'd click some steps, we'd bring in the data, you kind of get the gist, and then we can upload all of our financial data at once per department with currencies, with dimensions, and it's just really easy to manage. Obviously, there's a lot more to show off in SIP. I didn't get to show the model section here. We can create custom models, add them in as budget lines. You can make use of those beautiful formulas that you've already written in Excel and don't want to get rid of. We have tables, just a different way of seeing all the data. Right now, we're looking at an employees table. We also have a general fields table. Budget settings, we have the advanced benefits, great ways to get granularity where you see the individual spend on each employee per each individual benefit. And then the last section here, this actuals tab, it treats all of your live data a little bit differently. So you can look at the actuals data that has come in side by side, right to your budget, generate those awesome reports, and keep everything live and updated. But yeah, that's it. I did say I was going to show off that great help center. So, if you come into the question mark here and you open this help center, the basics, this is a public source. Anyone can go access this. You want to learn more about SIP, great way to start. We have the video hub here. This basic section is a great way to just roll through with your team, make sure everybody understands the budget lines, the budget tree. It makes training really easy. It answers a lot of questions. I love this little area personally. But that's it for me, guys. I'll send it back out to Bulin now.
So thank you so much, Declan. So a couple of things, a question I have is the SIP solution, does it have to work with Sage Intacct? Because it's a Sage product, right?
Yeah, so SIP definitely does work probably best with Sage Intacct, but it can work with any existing platform. Really, the process for making those two collaborate is we'll get that data in an Excel file. And as you saw, we can use that new budget creation tool to create a whole new budget from scratch based on an existing file. So yeah, we can work with a number of platforms.
And if the organization is already on Sage Intacct, what does that integration look like with SIP?
Yeah, if someone's already on Intacct, that integration is, it's kind of awesomely simple. We'd go in, we'd hit that new budget creation tool. We'd be dragging and dropping your dimensions. It's as easy as dragging and dropping to create that structure, that hierarchy. Afterwards, we dive into that hierarchy, looking at it at a high level, at each individual level, making those tweaks. If you have a unique department that you want to budget for in a different way than all of the other departments, that's where we'd add that nuance. And there's really not much after that. Once we get that structure created, that's 80% of SIP. Using the dashboards and the sheets for your analysis, rarely something do we have to train people on. It's very intuitive. Really, the last part of training is connecting to that live intact system to get those actuals rolling through. Just like that import step that I showed that had a few steps to walk through, same process for importing your actuals. You can do it, daily, monthly, whatever suits the budgeting process on your team.
And that budget from the SIP will sync right into Sage Intacct, correct?
Yeah, it goes both ways. So we can bring all of our data from Sage Intacct into SIP, and we can also send all that SIP data over to Sage Intacct. So, creating new budgets in that budget repository that then drive all of those reports in Intacct. It's a lot easier to do that with something like SIP.
Thank you for that. Just a quick comment. I will say that, what we generally see is once you use a budget management solution like SIP, you never go back to how you were doing budgets before. It's like if you were riding a bike and you switch to an automobile, once you start using the automobile to get from point A to point B, you're never gonna revert back to using a bicycle to go from point A to point B. Do you think it's a valid analogy, Declan?
Definitely. I was going to expand on it. Sometimes we've already invested into a really nice bike and we like to ride our bike. So that makes us hesitant to upgrade then to a car. But that model section that we showed in SIP, you have these existing areas, these existing features that can make use of kind of the investment that you've already put into other softwares in something like Sage Intacct Planning. But yeah, no one ever goes back, and if they do go back, they really don't enjoy it.
Yeah, I totally agree. So there are a few questions I wanted to run them by you, Declan. So let's just say, okay, is there a limit to the size of any budget in SIP?
No, there's not a limit. We do see sometimes if there are, around more than 30,000 budget lines, which is very rare. That's where you might see the tool slow down a bit. But I don't think we've ever encountered that situation. And anything under 30,000 budget lines, things tend to run very smoothly.
Okay, another question. Can you budget the Sage statistical account? So I know we've been talking about the general ledger accounts, but what about the statistical account?
Yep, you can bring in statistical account information as well. There's a dedicated step in the new budget creation process to bring in that statistical data separately than other data. And then additionally, also in that modeling tab, you have a dedicated section to working with those statistical accounts as well.
Okay, there's a question here. It says, how many accounting ERP systems does the Sage Intacct budgeting connect via an API? I don't know.
Yeah, so that it will just be with Sage Intacct. That's the only one that has that dedicated API. But we can very easily connect to any system using Excel files. So virtually, SIP included, pretty much any budgeting and planning tool will give you the option to export CSV files, and we can upload any of those and make sense of that in SIP.
Okay. There's a question is the price for Sage Intacct budgeting a flat fee or a variable price based on user? So I think I can answer that. It's actually a combination of both. There is a flat sort of a baseline price, and then there's a price based on the users, and it's also based on the type of users too. Contributor versus administrator. So there's a different price depending on the type of users. And then the last question here is what's the advantage of using this as opposed to a file share software in the cloud, such as Dropbox or SharePoint, where all parties can collaborate?
Yeah. The advantage is these built-in features that will make something like generating a report or creating a forecast the click of a button, as opposed to an entire endeavor of a project on its own. The line types in SIP are built in with these existing formulas, the ability to just generate a report automatically. These are kind of the little time saves. I mean, not even little, they're big time saves that go a long way. And the reality is taking down the amount of effort that's required to conduct a forecast or a scenario or generate a report. Reducing that effort really encourages your team to be doing it on a much more consistent basis. In the perfect world, we're running a forecast every single month. We're generating a new budget to actuals or a new rolling forecast report every single month. But because of the intensity that's involved with a task like that, when we're managing a file storage system, we don't get to doing something like that every month. And so our best practices in FBA kind of fall by the wayside because we're overwhelmed with other things. A tool like SIP reduces the amount of effort that you need to put into those practices and ensures that you're going to be doing them on a much more consistent basis, which is where you're really going to see the value, is with that consistency.
And also the maintenance. I mean, you're not maintaining that file anymore. And one of the other comments someone had mentioned here is that the formulas gets broken. That's absolutely true. The formula can be broken, and then that's where the numbers don't tie out, or there's a risk that you have the wrong number and whatnot, right? And this is a SaaS solution, so it's cloud-based. You can get to it anytime, anywhere. You don't have to maintain this thing. Right. So next slide, please. So we are wrapping up on our presentation today. JMT Consulting, we are very involved in doing this type of technology presentation through the JMT University. So I just wanted to quickly go through sort of what are the upcoming webinars that we have. The What's New in Sage Intacct R3, and that's on Thursday, August the 22nd, same time, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. That is going to be a more technical presentation. Really looks at sort of the what's new that's being released with this solution, the Sage Intacct. Optimize your fixed asset management. That's on Thursday, September the 19th. Again, the same time. And then we've got the nonprofit finance team benefits from AP automation, a fireside chat. So we will be in this webinar, we'll be talking with one of our clients, a nonprofit, on how they're able to leverage the Sage Intacct automation, not necessarily just Sage Intacct, but other AP automations, how they benefit from that. So that's on Wednesday, September 25th. And then finally, preparing for paperless audit, leveraging Sage Intacct for paperless audits. That's on Thursday, 26th. So I hope. So this really wraps up our presentation. I hope everyone benefits from this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you soon. I wanted to thank Declan for doing this presentation, because originally we were going to have another person, and Declan volunteered to step in because my colleague Dan unfortunately was not feeling well. So thank you so much, Declan, for stepping in, doing this presentation.
My pleasure, Dylan.
Next slide. Thank you. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're here to answer any questions you may have. We look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.